We too have heard the reports about a ransom letter in the media. As a family, we are doing everything that we can. We are ready to talk. However, we live in a world where voices and images are easily manipulated. We need to know, without a doubt, that she is alive and that you have her. We want to hear from you, and we are ready to listen. Please reach out to us.
It was a quiet Monday morning when the fourth letter arrived. By that point, the tension was no longer just fear, it was exhaustion. 4 letters from the same anonymous sender. 4 claims about Nancy Guthrie's whereabouts. 4 promises that they knew something the rest of the world didn't. And now, the message was escalating. The sender claimed Nancy had been seen south of the border just 5 days earlier. Mexico, alive, silenced, watched. The letter hinted at multiple people involved, not just a lone predator but a main perpetrator and accomplices. It suggested inside knowledge. It suggested fear. And it demanded the reward money in exchange for information. But here the problem. False ransom claims are not just cruel, they are federal crimes. Authorities were already involved. The FBI had been notified about every single letter, each envelope, each word, each fingerprint possibility. The sender even admitted they were afraid to come forward because of a burglary conviction from 10 years ago. That detail made the situation even stranger. Why include that unless you wanted to sound believable? Nancy Guthrie's disappearance had already shaken the community. The uncertainty was suffocating. Was this a calculated kidnapping, a burglary gone wrong, or something far more organized? There was physical evidence, a glove found along the roadside. On the surface, it felt like a break in the case. But the location didn't make sense. If someone abducted Nancy and drove off, would they really remove gloves while driving? And if they did, how would one end up discarded 2 miles away? It felt staged, almost theatrical, the kind of clue that creates more questions than answers. Then there was the burglary theory. Some believe this started as a simple break-in, but that theory begins to fall apart under scrutiny. A burglar dressed head to toe, wearing heavy gloves, trying to open drawers and sort through valuables. That's clumsy. Gloves make it difficult to handle jewelry. Take them off and you leave fingerprints. Keep them on and you lose dexterity. And if burglary was the goal, why strike when Nancy was home? She was at church every Sunday morning. That would have been the perfect time. Instead, someone chose a far riskier moment. Which raises a chilling possibility. Maybe theft was never the objective. By now, investigators had the letters, they had the glove, they had competing theories, but what they didn't have was Nancy. And somewhere out there, someone was either manipulating a grieving situation for money or sitting on information that could change everything. If you were that letter writer, what would you do next? Because the next move in this case would shift everything. Like this video if you want the truth uncovered. Comment your theory below, first comment gets pinned. Subscribe to Crime Decoder and turn on notifications. Now, this is where the story begins to take a darker turn. If the fourth letter was meant to bring clarity, it did the opposite. Instead of answers, it introduced something far more dangerous: specificity. The writer didn't just repeat vague claims. This time, they said Nancy had been seen in Mexico 5 days earlier. They claimed they were told to shut up. They claimed to know who the kidnapper was, and they suggested multiple people were involved, a central figure and several accomplices. That detail changed the emotional weight of everything. Because now this wasn't just about a possible sighting, it was about organization, coordination, a network. Investigators had to ask themselves, was this insider knowledge, Or was it someone carefully reading headlines and constructing a story that felt believable? Every letter had already been forwarded to the FBI. That decision created a paper trail, a timestamp, a documented chain of custody. If the writer was legitimate, that record would protect their claim to the reward money. If they were lying, it would protect the integrity of the investigation. But law enforcement doesn't chase theories, they chase evidence. And evidence has to make sense. The glove remained one of the strangest physical clues. Found along the side of the road, miles away, it raised more questions than it answered. If someone abducted Nancy and drove away, logic suggests the gloves would be removed inside the vehicle. Driving with thick gloves is difficult. Fine motor control matters when you're steering at speed. So how did one glove end up discarded outside? Was it dropped intentionally, thrown out of a moving vehicle, or placed there to create a narrative? Staged evidence is not uncommon in criminal cases. Sometimes it's meant to mislead investigators. Sometimes it's meant to create a false timeline. And sometimes it's meant to send a message. Then there's the burglary theory. The idea that this began as a simple home invasion that escalated. But even that theory begins to strain under pressure. A burglar dressed head to toe, operating with heavy gloves, would struggle to open jewelry boxes or search drawers efficiently. Removing gloves would defeat the purpose. Keeping them on would slow everything down. And burglars typically choose empty homes, not occupied ones. Nancy's routine was known. Sunday mornings meant church, a predictable window of opportunity. Yet whoever entered that home didn't wait for an empty house. That decision alone suggests intention. As investigators dissected the letters, forensic teams analyzed handwriting, paper fibers, envelopes, postmarks, anything that could identify the sender. Was the burglary conviction mentioned in the letter real? Or was it bait, a calculated attempt to appear vulnerable and honest? One thing was certain. If the writer truly knew something, withholding it was costing time. And in cases like this, time is everything. Because every hour without answers pushes the truth further away. And if Nancy really was taken across a border, the complexity of bringing her home would increase dramatically. So now the question becomes even darker. Was this the work of a desperate criminal, or something far more coordinated? Like this video if you're following closely. Drop your theory in the comments. First comment gets pinned. Subscribe to Crime Decoder and turn on notifications. Next up is where investigators begin confronting a chilling possibility. By now, the case was no longer just about a missing woman. It was about contradictions. Investigators had the letters. They had the glove. They had theories competing for dominance, burglary, ransom, organized kidnapping. But when they began laying each piece side by side, something felt off. The timeline didn't breathe naturally. It felt forced. The burglary theory continued to weaken under scrutiny. Experienced investigators know burglars prefer speed and silence. They enter, grab what they can, and leave before anyone notices. They avoid confrontation. They avoid risk. And they almost never choose a time when the homeowner is present, unless something else is driving the crime. Nancy's routine was not a secret. Sunday mornings meant church, an empty house, a predictable window, yet whoever entered that home chose a far more dangerous moment. That detail alone suggested this wasn't random. Then there was the ransom angle. Several individuals had reportedly received ransom notes connected to Nancy's disappearance. The FBI was actively investigating them, but ransom demands require proof of life. They require leverage. They require follow-through. So far, there was no confirmed evidence that Nancy was alive in captivity. The fourth letter complicated that even more. The writer claimed Nancy had been seen in Mexico, claimed she was silenced, claimed they knew the identity of the kidnapper, but they offered no verifiable details. No photographs, no specific location, just enough information to stir hope and fear. That kind of communication can be manipulative. In high-profile cases, false tipsters often insert themselves for attention or reward money. They study public updates. They mirror investigative language. They sprinkle in personal vulnerability, like mentioning a decade-old burglary conviction, to appear authentic. But law enforcement looks beyond emotion. They examine patterns. Forensic analysis on the letters began narrowing possibilities. Paper type, ink consistency, postmark origin, even subtle linguistic habits can reveal geographic background or education level. Each envelope was treated as potential evidence of obstruction, fraud, or worse. At the same time, investigators revisited the physical scene. The glove, the placement, the distance from the home. If it had been tossed from a vehicle, trajectory analysis might show that. If it had been placed intentionally, that suggested staging. And staged evidence implies planning. Planning implies intent. And intent suggests that Nancy may have been the target, not the accident. Meanwhile, the community was caught in emotional limbo. Hope flickered with every new letter, then dimmed when no concrete proof followed. Families in these cases often describe the feeling as psychological torture, trapped between grief and possibility. But investigators were beginning to lean toward something unsettling. What if the letters weren't leading them forward? What if they were meant to pull them sideways, away from the real trail? Because if someone was deliberately misdirecting law enforcement, that meant the truth was still buried somewhere much closer to home. Like this video if you're locked into this case. Comment your theory below. First comment gets pinned. Subscribe to Crime Decoder and turn on notifications. The next chapter reveals where the investigation tightens, and the legal consequences start coming into focus. As the investigation deepened, patience began to thin. By this stage, law enforcement had shifted from reacting to letters to actively dissecting them. Every word was analyzed for intent. Every envelope was tested. If the writer believed they could hide behind anonymity, they were underestimating how modern investigations work. Handwriting analysis can detect consistency across documents. Paper fibers can trace back to specific manufacturers. Ink composition can narrow down purchase sources. Even the way someone folds a letter can become a behavioral fingerprint. And then there's motive. If the sender was legitimate, they were withholding life-saving information. If they were lying, they were committing a serious federal offense: extortion, obstruction, potentially mail fraud. Claiming knowledge in exchange for reward money crosses a legal line very quickly. The FBI's involvement signaled that this was no longer just a local mystery. Federal resources meant broader databases, interstate coordination, and deeper forensic tools. But despite the pressure, one truth remained unchanged. Nancy was still missing. The burglary theory had nearly collapsed under logic. The ransom narrative lacked proof, and the Mexico claim, dramatic as it sounded, had not been verified publicly. Crossing an international border with a victim would require coordination, transportation, and silence from multiple people. That kind of operation leaves trails: surveillance footage, border data, witness accounts. So far, none had surfaced in a way that confirmed the letter's claims. Investigators also had to consider psychology. In cases like this, false tipsters often escalate when they feel ignored. The fact that this was the fourth letter suggested persistence. Either the sender believed they truly held leverage, or they were feeding off the emotional chaos. Mentioning a burglary conviction from 10 years ago may have been strategic. It created a narrative of someone flawed but honest, someone scared to step forward. It humanized the writer. But investigators don't rely on sympathy. They rely on evidence. And as forensic results develop behind closed doors, attention began shifting toward identifying the sender themselves. If the letters were a distraction, removing that distraction could refocus the entire case. Because every false lead burns time, and in missing person cases, time is the most fragile resource of all. The emotional toll on Nancy's family and community continued to grow heavier. Each public update carried careful language, hope balanced with caution. No confirmation, no closure, just uncertainty. And uncertainty can be louder than truth. As authorities tightened their grip on the letter trail, one question lingered in the background. If this wasn't a burglary, and it wasn't a credible ransom, then what exactly happened inside that house? Like this video if you want the case followed to the very end. Drop your theory below, first comment gets pinned. Subscribe to Crime Decoder and turn on notifications. Finally, we confront the lasting impact of this case, and the haunting reality that still remains. In the end, the loudest thing about this case was the silence. No verified proof of life. No confirmed sighting in Mexico. No public announcement of a solved abduction. Just 4 letters, a glove, and a trail of unanswered questions. Authorities maintained their position carefully. All communications were forwarded to the FBI. Every claim was documented. Every potential lead was preserved. If the writer truly had legitimate information, the record would show it. If the letters were a manipulation, that record would show that too. But the case itself remained suspended in uncertainty. The burglary theory never fully aligned with logic. The timing didn't fit. The risk level didn't fit. The physical limitations of searching a home in heavy gloves didn't fit. Even the discarded glove felt theatrical, almost symbolic, rather than practical. And the ransom angle lacked the one thing ransom demands require: proof. That left investigators, and the public, confronting something far more uncomfortable. Sometimes crimes don't present themselves cleanly. Sometimes they are layered with distraction, misdirection, and noise, false tips, self-inserted narrators, people chasing reward money, people chasing attention. Every one of those elements clouds the truth. If the letter writer was real and withholding critical information, the delay may have cost valuable time. If the letter writer was lying, they inserted themselves into a family's worst nightmare for personal gain. Either scenario carries weight. Meanwhile, Nancy's loved ones were left in a painful limbo that families of missing persons know all too well, the space between hope and grief. No confirmation of loss, no confirmation of safety, just waiting. Cases like this rarely fade quietly. They linger. They sit in the background of a community's memory. Every new rumor sparks conversation. Every new development reopens emotional wounds. And sometimes, the most haunting part isn't what we know. It's what we don't. Was the glove planted to mislead? Were the letters written by someone close, or by a stranger watching from a distance? Was this an organized act, or a chaotic crime that spiraled out of control? As of now, the established facts remain unchanged. The letters exist. The FBI has them. The investigation continues within the boundaries of evidence, and Nancy's disappearance remains unresolved in the public record. Which leaves us with a question that refuses to settle.
Heartbreaking video of Savannah Guthrie pleading for the return of her kidnapped mother. We'll have a look at what hidden clues the video may hold in a moment. But first, officials held a press conference today. 5 days after Nancy Guthrie's kidnapping, there's been no communication with whoever took her, and still no proof of life despite her family's request. Jim Murray is in Tucson with the latest.
She's still missing.
Right now, we believe Nancy is still out there.
Authorities are asking the kidnapper of Savannah Guthrie's mom to make contact following the family's heart-wrenching appeal seen around the world.
We saw last night the family, they just hurt.
TV networks interrupted regular programming to carry a police press conference live. The FBI revealed that a ransom demand included looming deadlines.
First, I think, was 5 o'clock today, and then it had a second deadline after that. So we are continuing. In a normal kidnapping case, there would be contact by now, trying to discuss that.
But there are other demands authorities have deemed hoaxes.
We have made one arrest related to an imposter ransom demand, and a complaint will be presented to a magistrate judge later today.
Jim Murray is in Tucson.
The local TV news anchor who was emailed one of the ransom notes is speaking out. She says she's convinced it is genuine and not a hoax.
A lot of it is information that only someone who is holding her for ransom would know. Some very sensitive information and things that people who weren't there when she was taken captive would know.
Former NYPD hostage negotiator Wally Zients says one family member, likely Savannah, will be coached on how to communicate with the kidnapper.
On her side, she's going to try to influence. I want to hear from my mother. I want to see her. I want some sort of indication that she's still alive.
Right. Former FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffindaffer believes a line of communication is already open.
They do not say how to contact us. So that leads me to believe there's some line of communication that they have between each other.
Savannah's moving appeal came at the same moment her friends and neighbors came together for a candlelight prayer vigil. Several were Savannah's former colleagues at a local TV station where she got her start before launching to national fame as the co-anchor of the Today Show. They watched her tearful plea with us.
She is without any medicine. She needs it to survive.
Can you see her heartfelt plea?
If someone truly knows what happened, why haven't they come forward? Drop your thoughts below. What do you believe makes the most sense in this case? Like this video if you want continued coverage. Share it to keep attention on Nancy's story. Subscribe to Crime Decoder and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next deep dive. Because sometimes the truth doesn't disappear. It waits.